So I can now describe how Myers-Briggs helps me, because after that 5-minute rant on identity, I would normally be like, this is not the topic. What are you talking about? The topic is how Myers-Briggs helps our relationship. Hi, Tina.
Hi, Klaus.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm in Hobart right now, and just traveling for the weekend. I'm in an Airbnb in the study room of the host. Um, Very vintage house here. My SI likes it.
Okay, so today we have a topic in mind, and the topic is called, if I find it, how MBTI helps our relationship. Yes, and I have prepared a few bullet points,
Prepared.
and we can
You
fill
are
them
a cat.
with life now. What? I am what?
Now you are a cat. Prepared.
Why? Prepared.
Prepared.
Funny.
It's
Yes,
icebreaker.
so
You are too serious. I'm already having to break it up a bit.
okay. So the first point is understanding how the other person functions. So the first bullet point is MBTI helped us because we better understand how the other person functions. And I wrote down that that is especially important early on in the relationship. Why do you think it helped us early on in the relationship to know Myers-Briggs, Tina?
I can't help it. You are a bit robotic.
That's how I am. That's who I am. Gotta have to deal with that.
It was important early on to definitely for knowing what to expect. So I've had INTJ as a friend before, and as I mentioned in the previous episode, the second personality type that I stored after I dig deep into INFP was INTJ. I guess, well, as an INFP, when I research something, I don't just research the academics of it. I research the memes and the jokes around the type as well. And yeah, you already know what the stereotype of INTJ is. It's being a cold, heartless robot, which is totally not true, which is totally not true. By knowing that, I know what to expect. Like your if you try to be too TE about my hurt FI, I see what you are trying to do easier, rather than thinking you are undervaluing my FI problems. And instead of, well, I would still feel like lashing out, but I would also add explanations, like okay, you don't get what I mean, let me explain it to you. Although then I have to dip into my inferior TE to do anything that involves explanations, and that usually gets difficult. But then you like, on the other hand, you see that as well. that it's difficult for me to explain because you know how INFPs are. And so you don't like, you never push me for explanation. Like, sure, you ask why, you ask questions, but you never rush for an answer. You're just throwing it out there. But I don't have to answer straight away because rushing me is not a good idea.
Yes, I think that's what I've learned early on. I described it as softening my TE, and I think my TE already is quite soft because I'm not a TE heavy INTJ, but still early on I noticed sometimes I could sense that my questions were too direct, and that there's the element of me seeing who I am and what I do to you, but also I understand how your FI struggles sometimes with expressing itself. So I can leave more room and don't have to get answers to everything, which as an INTJ I have to normally. So I just ask until I have the answer. And I realized that sometimes there is no direct answer because either there is none or you can't express it in words. So I have to deal with that then, and that's fine. But it helps to understand how you function, and that it's, like I said, difficult to express in words sometimes.
It's difficult to express how overly serious this is already. I feel an urge to break it up a bit.
Oh yes, I wanted to also, you mentioned earlier, I have so you said that it's a stereotype that INTJs are robotic, and then again you brought it up first when you heard me talking. So it's not only a stereotype, is it?
It's a stereotype for a reason. Like stereotype, something becomes a stereotype when you're just taking the surface value of it without knowing why. That's my definition. But when I say you're being robotic in this podcast, well, at the beginning of this podcast, it was not a statement about what you are overall. It was just a statement about how you were acting like in that very moment. But I'm not stereotyping you because I know that's not how you are all the time. Does that make sense?
Yes. And you also said I'm serious, and that's that's not robotic, but
that's not robotic.
Sounds like, I don't know. We can talk about that. So I prepared bullet points, and the topic is how Myers-Briggs helps our relationship, and then I want to talk about that. And so I can look, I guess, a little robotic because I have 5 bullet points, and you don't care about the bullet points, do you?
Not really. Perfect demonstration of dynamics right here.
Yes. Yes, so now I'm slightly confused because I want to look at the bullet points again. And I actually
you can look at them, it's fine.
Because that is how I function. Deal with it.
Okay.
What I also wrote for point A is TE offending me. Yes, that was a point early on. Where are you? There. So you would tell me about difficulties in your life, and I would come up with solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And how did that make you feel?
I usually feel invalid. Oh no, not invalidated, like undervalued, because well, FI is people say INTJ are very egoistic, but I argue that FI dominant users are even more so, because FI is all about identity. So when I express, or when I rant, when I expressed a problem, something that I struggle with to you, I'm actually identifying with myself with the suffering from the problem. And to try to fix that is like undermining my identity with the suffering. And that's like very insulting to FI. And you keep and you do sound very surprised whenever I explain to you how it sounds very insulting that you try to fix my problem, which I know that statement itself doesn't make much sense. But yeah, identity, which is what FI is very much about, is a big part of that attitude. Like I just want to rant because I want to express that right now I'm undertaking the identity of suffering itself. Like, look at me, this is how much I'm hurting. Look at the face of hurt. And then when you try to fix that, that's like trying to erase my existence. And it sounds very, and it does sound very dramatic. Yes, it's I don't feel that way all the time, so don't worry. But
I know.
yeah, when when I have mood swings, which INFPs do, we are actually taking on an identity of that mood. That mood becomes our identity, and to try to fix problem as a result of that mood is like trying to an attempt to erase that identity, and that's a very big deal for FI dominant. It's like a very touchy thing to do, and I know that I know that it's like not reasonable to, well, there's several things that are not reasonable about it, really. It's not reasonable that you are rejecting help when you actually need help, and it's not reasonable to assume suffering as an identity, because that's like that's a bit related to self-harm in a way, which is not good. But the feeling of assuming a feeling of the moment as part of my identity is something that's very innate to me. Like, it just comes very naturally, to the point of being very hard to control when it happens without some supreme discipline on my end. So I even though I'm aware of it, it takes a lot of work to overcome that natural ability to take a mood as my identity in that moment. And then obviously if a mood becomes my identity, then I naturally want to defend it, protect it, preserve it, everything to keep it there until it naturally goes away on its own, and then I get another mood and get another identity. And well, obviously when I say what we have, INFPs have mood swings, that means that we don't stay in that state. We don't stay in one mood or one identity all the time. in our FI. That identity is constantly changing. And usually the best way to overcome that is to just wait it out. But INTJ will have none of that. It's all about, well, why don't you do something about it now when you can? It's pretty easy. Just do A and B and C. You don't even have to do D.
We have some of that, but not. It's not all, like, it's not 100% identity. Well, it's not 100% identity for you, but like 80%. And so I can now describe how Myers-Briggs helps me, because after that 5-minute rant on identity, I would normally be like, this is not the topic. What are you talking about? The topic is how Myers-Briggs helps our relationship. And you start talking about your identity for 5 minutes. But like this, I know, since I know who you are, I don't go crazy, because I know that's just who you are. So that's a good example, because now, yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I know all this, but
I can tell from you hanging your head in shame.
it
Oh
was
my
still
God.
interesting. Yeah, I'm not angry. If without Myers-Briggs, I would probably think now, okay, this is, what do we do with this now? But like this, I'm very calm, and I really
You're
am. I'm
still
not
hanging
like
your head
angry.
over there.
Yeah, it's just, I wonder what the other way around. So
Well, stop.
you said before also that so considering all this, like, especially early on, I was like very blunt with solution giving. Did it help in any way to know that I'm an INTJ?
Yes.
How so?
Well, like, how does it help
How did it help you to know that I'm an INTJ, when I gave all these solutions and advice? Did it
I
help
know
you?
you are, yeah. I know you are not actually, and my natural response to an attack on my identity, which even if intentional, is to obviously like protect myself. But by knowing that you are an INTJ, I'm also aware that there is no hidden agenda or anything behind your attempt to help. You are genuinely really trying to help, because well, I don't know if all INTJs have no hidden agenda, because a certain country leader is rumored to be an INTJ, and and that's a bit worrying. But at least it helps me to evaluate that you are very likely to be giving me a solution without any other intent but to really help me. Like, it's pure and genuine. It's very likely to be pure and genuine. So yeah, that helps. Yeah.
Yes, and also the 5 love languages come into this, like, how do INTJs show love? They like to be helpful, and they don't even, I mean, I realize, because I know who you are, that my advice sometimes attacks your identity, which sounds a bit crazy.
Yeah,
How can genuine advice be offensive? But I mean, you explained why that
yeah. I
is
mean,
the
even to
case.
me, it sounds ridiculous, but it's just a very natural thing that happens to me. It's kind of like cancer. It happens very naturally, but it shouldn't exist.
What shouldn't exist?
Cancer.
Ah.
And yeah, good point about the 5 love languages. That was another very handy thing to know. Words of affection is pretty high on priority for INFP. I do like words of affection, but that's a lower priority for you. So I've learned not to expect much of that from you. Although with lack of words of affection, you do express words of affection in different ways. Like you don't say affectionate words like "I love you" directly all the time, but you use you use lots of emoji in our conversations, and you also you say practical things, and the amount of attention that you give me, that's plenty of alternative to words of affection, and I learned to I learned to identify those as an alternative to words of affection. So the love language and Myers-Briggs, that helps a lot as well.
Yes. Point B is point B is communicating through functions. Anything that comes to mind, how Myers-Briggs helped us because we use the functions to communicate?
Are you sure you want to ask me questions and let me rant another 5 minutes instead of you answering the question on your
No, I
end?
want us to talk about it. So you can start, but there's a time limit of 30 seconds. Go. 26
I'll
left.
I'll spend 20 seconds pouting. That's my
22.
communication method.
18. Well, I can start. Maybe that's an idea, and then you can add to it.
Yeah.
So, communicating through functions. I kind of let it just run through my NI in a way. So, I'm just very relaxed and just will think about it for a few seconds. I mean, we use it's like all our functions talk to each other. Like often I start sentences with my FI, or well, most of the time, obviously, I start with my NI, saw, blah, blah, blah. And then you can say, no, you misunderstood my identity again. Or you can say, yes, I feel so understood. My FI feels seen by your NI.
It's not that extreme all the time.
No, my FI was exaggerating it, but that's one example. And I remember, I don't think I saved it, but there was a time where we were chatting purely with our functions. Like for like 10 minutes, it was just our FIs talking, or my NI was talking to your NE. That's very cute. And it's also like, from an identity perspective, sometimes helpful, because I have FI too, and sometimes that's why I can relate to that strong identity, because I mean, it's not as strong for me, but it's more like deep down and can be uncovered. So yes, I think it's very helpful that we have like 4 access points each to, this will sound robotic again, I guess, but we have 4 access points. And
I would kind of argue that in a way some of our shadow functions sort of come into this as well. Perhaps
Yes,
not in a direct communication way, but definitely indirect.
yes, but we don't really use them. I don't say my SI, blah, 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 or my FE, especially not my FE, my NE. No, I never use any of the shadow NES.
Well,
What's this?
I don't mean like, I don't mean using them. We don't use shadow functions deliberately. And well, that's why they're called shadow functions. But they do kind of unconsciously slip in. And I don't mean that the shadow functions are being used. I mean, like say I'm very clumsy with SE, that's my third shadow, right? And yeah, it comes in the form of clumsiness. Whereas for you, FE, it just comes in the form of a very obvious non-existent FE, if that makes sense. Like when the
Yeah, but
function, when the shadow functions, when it comes to the moments where there are moments when the shadow functions are very obviously non-existent, like something is missing because they are in the shadow function. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know how to
well,
explain.
since we are at point B, communication through functions, no. Wait,
Okay,
but
forget it.
but I just remembered, well, it does, because we do communicate with shadow functions as well. And that's happening when my TI, it or ID, I don't know, some people say it, some
The
ID,
ID, yeah, the ID function is most obvious.
when my sixth function gets like overly analytical of when you show your identity, then
And you've seen my NIID rambling, like on rare occasions, but when I do one of those rambling, you say that's NI talking. That's my NIID talking. And I don't even aware of it.
yes. And yeah, your TI goes crazy when my
Yes.
TI analyzes your incongruities.
That's what I mean by shadow function working in an inverse way. I guess I didn't use that word earlier. Like when you TI on me, my TI demon, which TI is my demon, and so I react very strongly against TI, and that's what I'm trying to say here is that when I'm so against TI, that's my TI in X position working because I'm against it.
And it's very strong in me. And well, that's another example. You know that that's a big part of who I am, and that way you don't get offended as quickly as you would if
I would tell you I get offended if I'm stressed or if I don't have enough sleep, don't have enough energy to deal with it, then I would tell you I don't want to deal with this, or that I feel angry that you say that, etc.
yes. Yes, and you said the sentence before, if I didn't know you, I would be offended now.